New London Landmarks Annual Candidates Debate. I'm Laura Natush, the Executive Director of New London Landmarks. I'm so happy to see this full house. So as always, our Candidates Forum focuses on a specific area, economic development, historic preservation, and that tension that exists between private property rights and the public good. Full disclosure, we did email the candidates the questions in advance because what we care about is their well-considered and well-researched thoughts rather than their off-the-cuff thoughts. I have a couple of requests for you. Please silence your cell phones. Yeah, no flash photography. I don't want anything to distract the candidates during what is already a stressful situation. And I have some thank yous. First of all, thank you very much to Suzanne Marieski and the Public Library of New London for allowing us to use this space at no charge, even though we're going to be staying past their regular hours. I want to thank Attorney Scott Sawyer for moderating again. I also want to thank Rose Oliveira, who is going to be our timekeeper, Laura Nadelberg, who is Facebook Living this now. I want to thank all of you for being here, for being so civically engaged that this is how you are spending this evening. Bob Stuller, who at our request is videotaping this so that he can upload it to YouTube. And most of all of our candidates, not only for participating tonight, but for running for office. I remember that being a candidate is very hard, and some of them know that once you win, it's even harder. I would like to introduce our candidates now. Efrain Dominguez, a Democrat, Republican Kat Goulart, Democrat Martha Marks, Democrat Alma Nartates, Democrat Anthony Nolan, Republican Marty Olson, Republican John Russell, Republican Tim Ryan, Democrat John Sadie, Democrat Mike Tranquita, and Democrat Don Bandito. And with that said, I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, Attorney Scott Sawyer.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a nice night and enjoying this nice, warm New England weather. Basically, I just wanted to describe the format for tonight. Sometimes all of the candidates will answer a question. Sometimes half of the candidates will answer a question, and the remaining candidates will then answer the following question. Basically, we're not looking to give any candidates an advantage, so no candidate will be the first to answer more than one question. Answer first to one question. Also, the candidates will have a minute each for opening statements, and then 60 or 90 seconds to answer each question. Our timer will hold up a yellow paper when you folks have 30 seconds left, and then a red paper when your time is up. And then I walk over to you and take the microphone away. Everyone here, this is probably my 5th or 6th time doing this, and it's really enjoyable when everybody sticks to the time so that nobody feels as though they're getting shorted. And there's no direct rebuttal time whatsoever. However, at the end of the evening, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing statements, and they can use this for rebuttals or to answer questions that they didn't have time to fully answer previously. So, here we go. We're going to ask for a 1-minute opening statement, and we're going to ask first from Efrain Dominguez.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Scott, Attorney Scott, for moderating tonight. I want to thank also Laura, the Executive Director for New London Landmarks, and everyone that's here this evening. Obviously, my name has already been said. I'm very excited to be here, and again, excited to be running again for City Council. New London has great value to me. I've been a lifelong resident here. I'm invested in this city. and I see great potential in this city, and not only in the city, but in its people. The last thing I want to say is that we do have a lot of historical buildings, and I think it is incumbent of us to make sure that we preserve them because it tells a lot about our history and it's our heritage. Thank you.
And next, we'd like to hear from Kat Goulart.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you to Landmarks for hosting. My name is Kat Goulart. I am a Republican. I've lived in the city for almost 11 years now. I am involved with New London Babe Ruth Baseball, volunteering. I do some things in the community with police and community relations through the FBI. I also work for myself. I've been self-employed since I've been 23 years old. History is something that's really important to me. I was very nearly a history major in college, so I love the rich history that we have here in New London. Thank you. And I would love to see us capitalize on it more. I think it's a big draw for us, both with us being by the ocean and with the history that we have. And to work that into economic development for me is something that I would love to see us do more in the future.
Thank you very much. And Martha Marks.
Hi, thank you, Landmarks, and thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Martha Marks. I'm a Democrat running for my second term for City Council. I love being a Democrat. I am a visiting nurse, and I get to go into a lot of the old homes. It's actually one of the really fun parts of my job, and I see some amazing old homes that people have restored and some old homes that need a lot of work, that it's very difficult for people to restore them. Keeping those homes here in New London keeps our city what it looks like now, and we need to continue to do that.
Thank you. And Alma Nartates. I get it?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, thank you.
My name is Alma Nartates. I'm a Democrat running for the first time, and I'm running because I care about the city of New London. My wife and I bought a house here 2 years ago, and I quickly got involved. I'm an alternate on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I have learned a lot in planning and zoning, and it really kind of is full circle how it ties into historic preservation. So I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. And Anthony Nolan.
Yes. Hi, my name is Anthony Nolan. I am a third-term city councilor. I am the council president at this time, and I am trying to do it again. I am amazed by the architecture of this city. I live in the Blackhall Street area, where there are a lot of homes that are saved and redone in accordance to a lot of the codes that are required for historic housing. And I think that is a jewel for our community. A lot of history, as Councilor Dominguez has said, in regards to that. I just hope that we can find ways to preserve even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Marty Olson.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Marty Olson, and as I look out over the audience, I see an awful lot of friends, and the very small handful of folks that I may not have met yet, I hope before the evening's out, I'll have a chance to shake hands and introduce ourselves. I have served the City Council 4 terms, including 1 year as mayor. And under full disclosure, I think it would be appropriate to add I'm a member of the board of directors of New London Landmarks. So I work with this organization, and I thank them for putting on this event this evening. Thank you.
John Russell.
Is this crackling? Everybody hear that crackle?
Yep.
Hi, I'm John Russell. I'm running for city council. I've been here, I got stationed here in 1970 as a young guy in the Navy, and I chose to stay here in New London. I love it here. I served 1 term on city council. I was deputy mayor from 2010 to 2011. I was co-chair of the School Building and Maintenance Committee, liaison to the Water and Water Pollution Control Authority, which I now serve as vice chair of. Very involved in the community, Kiwanis, Neighborhood Alliance, Save Ocean Beach, Homeless Hospitality Center. I helped found that. I founded Homeward Bound Treasures, and many other things that I don't have time to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Ryan.
This one crackles too. Okay. So hi, my name is Tim Ryan. I'm running for City Council as well. I've been in New London for a little over 10 years now, in the region for about 14 years. I work at Electric Boat. Most importantly, I have two little girls, twin girls, 6 years old. They're in the New London Public School System right now. They are my life. With regards to the city, I am currently on the Charter Review Board right now. I served as the Vice Chair for Planning and Zoning. I was on Planning and Zoning for about 4 years. And besides that, one of the things that I think is pertinent to this forum tonight, I used to live right next to what I consider one of our treasured landmarks, which is Lighthouse Inn. And I think many people in this room probably share the same delight that I have with the fact that it is now getting rehabilitated, albeit slowly, but it's getting rehabilitated. It's finally getting attention. So I look forward to discussing items and issues like that tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. John Sabat.
Thank you all for coming out, especially with the Yankees playing. Just to let you know, top of the fifth, they are winning 2-0, so that's good. Regarding why I'm here, I'm running for New London City Council again. I presently serving in my first term. Previously, about 20 years ago, I served on the New London Board of Education for 2 terms, and during that time, there was a situation where they wanted to rip down an old school, which eventually happened. I was one of the only people that was against that. I'm a preservationist, and I like to see buildings stand. I believe in the history, and I believe in our rich history. But at the same time, there is times, for example, Post Hill, where economic development comes through, and historic buildings do have to be taken down. There's other times when it's just no longer economically feasible, especially with wood structures, to keep them up. So I'm not going to say that my heart is broken every time a building is torn down, but I would much prefer to see a building saved as opposed to torn down. And that's it. So again, thank you very much for having us all here this evening.
Thanks, John.
Did I go over my time? Is that what that red thing?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
Michael Tranquita.
I'd like to thank Landmarks for inviting us again for the council debate. My name is Michael Tranquita. I'm the retired city clerk in New London. I worked for the city for 26 years. I am the 8th owner of a house that was built in 1896 by John Squire. John Squire also built 3 other houses in the Squire Street, Linden Street area, so that's probably why they named the street after him. I'm a lifelong resident. I'm seeking my 3rd term on the council, and they just held up the sign, so thank you. 30 more seconds. Oh, okay. My expertise is a little more on vital records and genealogy than historic preservation, but living in a house that's that old, you have a good idea of what you can fix and what you can't fix by yourself. So it's quite amazing. City has a lot of old houses. One of my favorites was a building they torn down, but it was a business. I'll talk about that later.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Don Vendetto.
Thank you. My name is Don Vendetto. Thank you to Landmarks for hosting and for everyone for being here. I'm running for my 2nd term on council because I want to continue to help push legislation that moves New London forward without breaking the bank. I want to continue the work that I have already done with our CDA and real estate developers to bring projects to the Fort Trumbull, Howard Street, and downtown areas, and projects that increase the tax base and help us become less reliant on state funds. And however, with all of that new development, it is very, very important that we maintain and protect our historic properties and integrate them into our overall economic plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our first question. And just to be clear, it's sort of like streetlights. The yellow means caution, and that means you only have 30 seconds left. And red means stop. Okay? Let's do that. All right. So, first question. Did you sign the New London Landmarks petition or otherwise take action to support the preservation of 130 and 116 Bank Street. Why or why not? Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer, beginning with Alma Nartates.
I don't think I'm going to take up. I don't think I'm going to take up all the time because I had to abstain from that vote. I was on the Historic District Commission. I'm also on the Planning and Zoning Commission, so I was not able to sign that petition. However, if I could have, I would have.
Fair enough. Thank you. Anthony Nolan.
I did sign the petition, and I signed it because after much discussion with some of the members of the Historic Society, or the Landmarks Society, and the residents, I find that there was a need to try and save those buildings. Another reason why I didn't try not to is because the owner did not come with a plan that I felt was enough to make us decide that we should allow him to do what he wanted to do to the buildings.
Thank you, Anthony. Marty Olson.
Thank you. I did not sign a petition, but I would like to speak to demolition in general. And has our community not learned, after the destruction of urban renewal, the impact that taking down buildings is going to have on our community? We have to really give serious consideration to that. I worry, though, that we are taking advantage of a situation here where the owner is being asked after the fact, with no regulations in place. We have to be careful about that. We have to be uniform in our meting out of the rules. And I don't want to see anybody getting abused in that regard. Thank you.
John Russell.
Thanks, Marty. Well, I did not sign the petition. And the reason I did not sign it is because there were no covenants in place at the time that I could find. And I've asked people, they keep telling me, is it or is it not a historical district? If it is, show me the paper that says it is and tells you what you can do and what you can't do. I don't believe that we have the right to do that. If someone buys a piece of property, it belongs to them and they should be able to do with it as they please. It's similar to buying a car from somebody and then 2 days later telling you you can only drive it in reverse. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Ryan. Okay.
So I did not sign the petition either. However, the reason I did not sign the petition was more process oriented. I noticed when the petition I saw was at Muddy Waters. And when I looked at the petition that was there, I saw a number of people signing that did not live in New London. One person that stuck out at me lived in Fisher's Island. So, I mean, to me, if we're going to have a petition that affects our local downtown, I want to have signatories that live in our city. So that was one major reason why I didn't sign. The other reason I didn't sign is because I was never presented, I asked for, but was never presented with objective data with regards to the cost evaluations for demolition versus rehabilitation on the properties themselves. Had I been given that data to be able to make an objective decision, I would have. I think we've later found out that there is the process in place that that was not fulfilled, but we can't go back in time now. So.
Thank you, Tim. John Sadak.
So I don't recall whether I signed a petition or not. I believe somebody had mentioned to me today that the petition had circulated at a Democratic Town Committee meeting. It may or may have not been there. I did deal with the issue, though, as a city councilor. And at that point in time, I voiced my concerns for public safety. That if, in fact, the building that we were talking about was in such disrepair, that there was going to be, something falling and hitting somebody on a sidewalk or whatever, that I felt it was necessary that the property owner take into consideration, the aspects of safety. And whether or not he had the financial ability to afford to rebuild the building as opposed to take it down should have also been given consideration, because I do believe in individual property rights, even though I do believe in historic preservation. So if somebody does buy a piece of property, I do not believe that we have the right to impose our financial values on that piece of property.
Thank you, John. Michael Tranquita.
Thank you. I would have to say I'm probably having a senior moment because I can't remember if I signed that petition or not. We have one hole basically on Bank Street, which was the old Kaplan Furniture Store right across from Pearl Street, that at one time was going to be developed, and now basically there's stone foundations. I've walked around this building. I am not a structural engineer. I'm just eyeballing the building. It looks like it can be saved. I would like to see the owner and the city sit down with possibly preservationists or any of the state tax credits that are available to rehab the building, because the last thing I would like to see is another hole on Bank Street.
Don Vendetta.
Thank you. So I worked with the executive director, Mr. Tush, actually to draft an ordinance that was presented to and accepted by the New London City Council. As the chair of the Economic Development Committee, I chaired a meeting at City Hall that allowed the public to offer their opinions on the matter and for Mr. Tush to present the position of New London Landmarks into the public record. In my closing statement at that meeting, I expressed my personal opinion in favor of Landmark's efforts to stop the demolition of the two buildings. And with that said, there's more to the process. Somebody mentioned process. Maybe we'll have time to touch on that later. There were options presented to the property owner for access to additional funds, potentially. So it wasn't just a carte blanche no, and hopefully we can touch on that more. Thank you.
Thank you. Efrain Dominguez.
I don't think Councilor Tranquita has senioritis, because I can't recall that I signed the petition, but I recall when what Councilor Bendito stated when it came over our desk, and I did affirm that I wasn't for the demolition of the building, and expressed my reasons why. And just bluntly to tell you, I believe that, you know what, when we have history and when we destroy history, like a historical piece, we'll never have it again. Okay, we'll lose it completely. And once we demolish it, it's gone forever. I also think that, you know what, there's no chance to renovate or save a historical building once it's gone. And I just talk about, because history is so important, and it's part of our fabric here in New London. So that's why I'm against demolishing any historical buildings.
Kat Goulart.
I did not sign the petition. The reason for that is because I sit on the Economic Development Commission. I was recently appointed to the commission at that time, and I was concerned that the issue may come before the commission. It did ultimately, and the commission made a recommendation on the issue. However, had I not been on the Economic Development Commission, I would have signed the petition, not to put a full stop on any process that the building owner wanted to have happen, but to put a pause on it so that we could have a conversation between Landmarks, the city, and the building owner in order to see what the best use of the building was, what the costs were. Because also I agree with Councilor Dominguez that once it's gone, it's gone. And with Councilor Vendetta, as far as getting additional funding and credits and those sorts of things, those are really important, that we need to make sure that we've exhausted all options before we take something down.
Thank you. Martha Marks.
I did not sign the petition just because the only one time I saw it was at the DTC meeting, and I didn't know enough about the two sides. I wasn't educated enough. I didn't know the owner's position, if he had been offered, different breaks or offered to work with Landmarks to get some money to try to develop it, to try to rehab it. So I did not sign it because of that. Once it came to council, it was there was no plans on his part, and it was a very easy decision. And I think we unanimously voted for it to go on. And I will say, I've actually lived in Post Hill Place. My parents came here 54 years ago, and when I was 4, they knocked down our house at Post Hill Place, which made me have to move to Waterford, and so I grew up in Waterford, and I'm still scarred by that, because I like being in New London, so that's why when I grew up, I moved here to raise my children. But, they knocked down some beautiful houses on Post Hill Place for the bridge, and that's what happens, but thanks.
Thank you. And on to our next question. It's for half of our candidates, beginning with Tim Ryan. Many cities use historic preservation as an economic development tool to create a unique, marketable sense of place. If elected, how would you integrate historic preservation into your economic development strategy for New London? You have 90 seconds to answer this question.
So I will just be upfront and say that I do believe historic preservation and rehabilitation is an effective economic tool. We've seen it used time and time again, not just in our area, but in many other areas like Charleston. We've even seen it as close as Westerly. I mean, it's been used there too. I will note that my definition of historic preservation is not just inclusive of buildings, but is also of our history, our fabric of history. So when I say that, I mean things such as the Phlox annual Benedict Arnold thing, keeping history alive. To me, that's holistic historic preservation, and certainly buildings are part of that. I would certainly uphold the current rules that we have in place with regards to the Connecticut general statutes, the demolition ordinances that we have already in place. I believe that one of the characteristics that you should be looking for any candidate up here is an open mind. Somebody who's willing to listen to how to adjust those ordinances and adjust the regulations. Either way, could be more stringent, could be less, depending on the situation. But to that end, I do believe New London does have a rich historic heritage. It can be used to our advantage. And I do believe preserving an image of what New London was and can be is definitely going to be important to any economic development platform that any candidate has. And I think there's multiple opportunities to take advantage of that, and I hope we get an opportunity to answer that in one of the later questions.
Thank you, Tim. John Sadai.
Thank you. Again, I don't think we have to look much further for historic preservation than the Harbor Towers, City Flats type of historic preservation that was down there. Harbor Towers, of course, is brand new. Some buildings on Bank Street were in fact demolished to create what I believe is a beautiful structure. But at the same time, behind that, the same organization that demolished some not so good structures, took some other not so good structures and is creating wonderful housing. And it's also spurring on economic development. Anybody saw in the paper the other day, I think one of the houses was purchased for $28,000, a whole bunch of money put into it. And then individually, there was 2 units sold for $150,000 for a total of $300,000. So, I mean, it's bringing people downtown. It creates great economic development. It makes our downtown area much more healthy. And again, it brings great tax benefit to our city. So that would be a perfect example of right here in our own town. And I would strongly recommend that anybody that has structures like that, they take into consideration seeing the wonderful work that Tony Silvestri has done. And, his is done with historic preservation in mind. It's not just throwing some $100 windows from Home Depot into it. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Michael Tranquita.
Thank you. We need to safeguard what we have downtown historically wise. Downtown, when you look at State Street, it's a mixture of beautiful old late 1800 buildings and then prefab concrete buildings or just plain square box brick buildings. We need to keep an eye on what is being built down there. You don't want to over-regulate because you could lose a developer. But to put something up just for the sake of tax revenue, you need to step back. The developer and the city, historic preservation associations need to look as to maybe something could be tweaked a little. because unfortunately, redevelopment in the 70s tore down so much. I was in high school at the time, and we just lost our Newport. And if anybody remembers John Street, because I used to go down that street all the time with my parents to go to Salsa's Meat Market. It was one of the last of the cobblestone streets in the city. It was a beautiful street.
Thank you, Michael. Don Vendetta.
In New London, if we were to lose touch with and the relevance of our historical significance to the founding of this country, we lose one of the biggest assets we have going for us in the big picture of economic development. Historical significance is a strength and an asset if it is managed properly and used as a marketing tool. Locally, if you look at Mystic and Stonington, they have used their historical buildings and culture to present themselves as a destination. Their success is driven by great marketing, but also by understanding the significance of their historic buildings, protecting them, and integrating them into the bigger picture of their economic development plan. And with the current resurgence and interest in our downtown New London properties, some of which are historic, we have the opportunity to invite new and fresh ideas and developers into the downtown mix of bars, restaurants, art galleries, antique shops, and tattoo parlors. So I want to work with developers and property owners, the Office of Development and Planning in New London Landmarks, to ensure that our historic properties are protected and become part of an overall development strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Efrain Dominguez.
Thank you. All right. First thing I will do is planning where development should or should not go. I will implement policies that protect our urban landscape, which in turn will protect air and water quality, provide places for recreation, and create tourist attractions that bring investment into local economy. Another thing that I will implement too is policies that support walking, biking, and public transit. And this in turn will help reduce air pollution from vehicles and save the people money.
Thank you. And Kat Goulart?
Right. When I very first saw this question, some cities popped into my head immediately from my travel. Sedona, Arizona, Fort Worth, the Stockyards area specifically in Texas, Beaufort, North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia. Those are all cities that have unique and defined, and you can see when you're driving through them, historical areas. They bring in a lot of tourism dollars. They don't necessarily have any more history than we do. They just capitalize, and I would argue actually that they may have less history than we do. Look at I mean, as Councilor Vendetta touched on, our country was founded in large part, because of the battles that were fought on our ground here, on the very soil we're sitting on right now. That's important. If we had a marked and distinctive area such as, you know, our downtown area or other areas throughout, even Star Street, you can see the history there. It's gorgeous. People they're drawn to areas like that. That's something that we can really capitalize on and get people to come here. People want to come here anyway. We have retail, we have beaches, we have a lot of really great reasons for people to want to come and stay in New London. That brings in that little bit extra that we're just missing.
Thank you. And for the balance of our candidates, beginning with Martha Marks, would you ever support temporary tax abatements or other financial incentives for the rehabilitation of historic properties which might otherwise be demolished? You have 90 seconds for this question.
So, which otherwise might be demolished, I think is the big part of that question. I mean, whenever anybody hears tax abatements, none of us want to do it. It's something we don't like. But with some of these, our housing, the houses that we have, I've been in them. A lot of them are falling apart. And I think there might be times when tax abatements would be necessary in order to keep that home. I'm going to answer a little bit of the other one since I didn't have a chance. I just wanted to bring up something, the one other part of the for the economic development, it's really important to me that we try to house the people that live here in New London that have a hard time with housing. And I went to Fresh New London, one of their first forums on the Community Land Trust, and that would be to take some of the housing areas of houses that aren't holding up very well, and it's just an amazing idea, and I think if that can get off the floor, and they might need tax abatements, I think that is something that would really help our citizens of New London and our historic preservation.
Thank you. Alma Nartartes.
So regarding tax abatements, when I think about this, I would say that the organizations that are seeking those tax abatements, I would like to see them aggressively pursue all the grants that are available for those historic sites. I would be in support of tax abatements depending on what they look like and how, and where it's hard to say in the financial state that we're in right now, but it's definitely a conversation and a dialogue that I would be open to having. I'm going to take the rest of my time just to go back to the second question. The question is historic preservation and economic development. I believe that they go hand in hand. It is very marketable, and I think that we need to start with a vision. I am a huge very supportive of what's called form-based coding, and it's getting away from the conventional zoning regulations that we currently have and changing the system so that instead of a building, for example, instead of determining that what it's used for, instead of using that, look at how does it fit into the rest of the landscape. In this case, it would be downtown. And I think until we come up with a vision and a strategy, I believe that, which I believe is attainable, I would support that. Thank you.
Anthony Nolan.
At this time, where we are financially with the city, I would not be in favor of tax abatements. What I would prefer to try and make arrangements with is some incentives or subsidies where we can give breaks in other areas, maybe application fees, maybe assist with some of the zoning and planning regulations through that form. But at this time, I wouldn't be in favor of tax abatements because our city is just in such a financial crisis. I think that if that was discussion, there would have to be some rapid gain of payback somehow to the residents of the community. I don't think it should be just one-sided.
Marty Olson.
The history of tax abatements in New London is, to be charitable, mixed. And I think most of us tend to remember when things have not turned out quite so well. That said, I think that the utilization of tax abatements or having them at least in the toolbox of development is important. To have them in the toolbox and available. And to be used cautiously and judiciously and on a case-by-case basis. And in the context of this question, I'm not even sure if they are allowed for single-family homes because I don't recall that ever happening. Maybe they are. I tried to reach Ned Hamilton. He's on vacation, so I was going to try to get a clarification on it, but was unable to. But I think we need to be very careful about that. And if we're going to do that, to tie it into some other policy, and I think an area that we need to really hone in on is to try to generate owner occupancy in all of our housing. That has created a problem where we have absentee landlords throughout our community, and it's deteriorated neighborhoods quickly. And I think that we need to do our best to try to reverse that trend. Thank you.
John Russell.
Marty, did you read my notes?
No.
I think he did because he said just about everything I was going to say. Tax abatements on a very limited case-by-case basis, I believe we need to at least have it there if we need it. New York City, strangely enough, pretty much rebuilt its whole self using tax abatements. Now, it can be a good thing if used properly, because a percentage of something is better than nothing of nothing. So once I said it's, incentives, all those things, if, I think they should all apply for the grants and everything they can get, and then go into it. Because I know a number of people right now who are developing and they're waiting on the Barrows building to get some things. So they're there, and tax abatements should stay as a very cautiously used thing. Thank you.
Thank you. This question is for all of the candidates, beginning with Anthony Nolan. What is your favorite historic building, street, or open space in New London, and why? You each have 1 minute.
I'm going to say the Harris Building on State Street. When I first arrived in the city, that was my first field trip with the youth. And I always envisioned a youth program there that provided like social services and things that youth are in need of today. And the architecture and the floor plan of the building, I just thought was so amazing that that was just the best building for me when I got to the city. So that's the Harris Building on State Street.
Marty Olson.
As I've been going door to door throughout the community, a recent street that I traversed is one that I lived on for a year when I was a young man, about 20, Prospect Street. Yes, Myrna? And quite frankly, it brought back memories. It's like a step back in time. And it really had made a very, very big impression on me walking down that street. It's small, it's quaint, it's quiet, even though it's adjacent to a school. And I think it shows the best of New London in terms of its historic preservation. I do have a concern on one building on that street, though, that I believe is going to become a sober house. And that is a problem in the community that we need to be looking at seriously. Thank you.
John Olson. John Olson? Wow, what Olson? You guys are all reading off the same notes, right? Sorry about that.
Thanks, Scott. Well, you got the Lighthouse Inn, Ocean Beach train station, the churches, but my favorite place is Fort Trumbull, looking into the city, at the cityscape. I'm down there every single morning, have been for many years, walking my dog every single morning. And when I look, I'm awed. I stand there and I look at this beautiful city, and I can almost see the old sailing ships there. And I go, wow, that's something. The bows used to extend right over Bank Street next to the Custom House. Loved it. But then I also I come back to today, and I would like to see the walkway extended all the way over to Fort Trumbull. I think that would be wonderful. The only thing I would wish for would that Frontier take down that ugly microwave tower. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Ryan.
So I think there's a variety of places to choose from in New London, both properties and districts. It's really hard to choose one, but I do have a favorite house in New London. I don't own it. I wish I did. It's on Worthington Road, 2 Worthington Road. It's a big stone house. Not very much to look at, but it's very impressive. I went and toured it once. It's amazing inside, and the architecture is beautiful. Commercial building, I'd have to say the Guard Theater. I mean, the recreation inside the Guard to its period, to what it was back when it opened up as a theater was amazing inside. But I have a special affection for colonial era, and so with that, the Winthrop Mill is probably on the top of my list. It's one of those spaces that not many people really consider or know about in New London until they actually go see it. So for me, that would be on the top of the list for spaces in New London that I'd love to visit.
John Sadai.
Thank you. Starting with where we hold our council meeting, City Hall, the train station, older schools such as the Saltonstall School, the Namio School, churches, St. Mary's Church, pretty much all the older churches in town. Basically, as I mentioned, the older schools, some of them have been rehabbed, not necessarily in the best way. So I'd like to see that, change maybe. Statues, the John Winthrop statue over by the old Buckley High School, which has been rehabilitated wonderfully. Also, open spaces like Vets Field, as John mentioned, Fort Trumbull, and places like that. With the buildings, the parks, and the statues. I don't know if I mentioned Vets Field or not, but we're in the process of rehabbing that, and hopefully we'll bring that back to its grandeur also. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Tranquita.
Thank you. My number one building had to be a building they tore down, which was the Neptune building at the foot of State Street. If you were standing on the front steps of the train station, it would be about a 2 o'clock angle. It was a beautiful 4-story, light and dark brown sandstone building. It had a lot of style to it. I'm going to date myself, but the old Thames Valley Transit buses used to park in front. The first floor used to have terminal lunch. And around the corner, I remember there was a little pet store. But the architecture and the shape of the building, basically it would be where the sculpture is next to the parking garage, because that section of Atlantic Street. Another one would have been the old Nabisco warehouse right around the corner from John on Atlantic Street. That had a lot of style to the red brick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Too many spaces and buildings to name in a minute, but one of my favorite spaces is to stand right up here at the top of State Street, right in front of the historic courthouse, and taking that view all the way down State Street. And the mix of architecture from Greek Revival, Italian Renaissance, Art Deco at the Guard Theater, Victorian. It's just an awesome sight if you just stop for a few minutes, take it all in, and take a look. And one of my favorite buildings, historic buildings, I would have to say Shaw's Mansion, because of the significance it has in the overall history of the country, the fact that George Washington crashed out there a few times, and the Shaw's family's involvement in shipping and privateering was pretty impressive. Thank you.
Thank you. Efrain Dominguez.
Great. I want this question. I'll get right to it. I think, I think it's one of the most remarkable building that we have. We have many, but this one for me is the Mohegan Apartments. Okay, originally known as the Muncie Building, and then eventually later on became the Mohegan Hotel. It was built in 1896, and I'll tell you why I love it. I love it because it's history. We had many people that came by, many famous people and infamous people. One was Al Capone, and then one of the famous one was President Woodrow Wilson, who came to visit his then sister who was there, sick. It was later on then converted to senior apartments in 1980, but it was one of the most, it was the tallest building in Connecticut in 1896, and lastly, it was one of the finest hotels in Connecticut. And lastly, this is my last one, the rooftop. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to go up to the rooftop. You could see what a phenomenal view we have of all New London, okay, the Thames River, and of course, one of my most famous things that I love is the hardwood floors and the ballroom that has not been renovated. It's as it is, so thank you.
Thank you. Kat Goulart.
Thank you. Well, actually, Councilor Nolan stole my answer. What I had written down on my questionnaire was the Harris Place building. A little bit different reason. When you walk inside, it's gorgeous, and I believe it's the only building in the city that you can walk through from one side to the other of an entire city block. When you look upstairs, you up from the lobby. It just is like a look back in history. It's beautiful. And little tip, if you go upstairs to the upper floors, it kind of feels like The Shining up there, and I'm waiting for two little girls to come around the corner at me. It's really cute. But a close second and third for me. One was the Pequot Chapel. It's beautiful. It's just breathtaking. It's, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure we all have, but it's gorgeous. And then another is very near my house, and because I'm a big baseball fan, is Veterans Field. Used to be Morgan Field, because they played Morgan League baseball there, and Yogi Berra, the famous Yankee, was drafted there, so the legend goes. Go Yanks.
This was my favorite question too. So I actually get to go into the Mohegan almost every week, sometimes every day of the week, and I get to go up to the 11th floor and do my charting, sit up there and do my nurse's notes, and it is the most beautiful place. But my favorite is the Gard Arts Center. My kids were young. I have 4 children, all in their 20s, and I've spent a lot of money taking them to shows. And when those doors first opened and I walked in there, I can still remember how I was so proud, and it was so beautiful. And they have just continued to do an unbelievable job. I got to see Raffi sing Baby Beluga in there, and then we just got to see Crosby, and it's just one of the most beautiful places. I still walk in there every time I go to a show, and you just take a deep breath and are so proud that that's in New London.
Thank you, Martha. Alma Nartazos.
When I moved here in 2015, I was a bit overwhelmed because in California, the oldest structures that we have are the missions. So kind of put that in perspective, right? It was so surreal for me to even walk through a cemetery where Revolutionary War heroes or soldiers were buried. So I really wanted to get to know the area, and a friend of mine said, you should really go through the New London 12-week academy. And I signed up, and I think it was the 6th or 7th week, they took us on a tour to Shaw's Mansion. And I stood, it was an amazing experience. I stood in a room where George Washington, and he did stay there twice, 1756 and 1776, and I stayed in the same room where he spent the night and looked in the same mirror that George Washington did, and I was blown away, and I've been hooked ever since. So that is my favorite place.
Thank you very much. If you'll indulge me for a minute, I grew up in East Lyme. I live and work in New London now. New London for me is an interesting spot. I went to college here, went to Connecticut College, so I graduated from Conn, and there is a view from Conn College that you can look out over the water across the fields, which is just spectacular. You can see the Ledge Lighthouse in the background. Also, in junior high school, I played a lot of basketball through high school and college. And in junior high, though, it's in New London where I was competing against the New London Middle School. Many of the same guys I know still to this day. And it was in New London that I realized I was good. I could play. Which is really kind of a neat thing. So I would say that Benny Dover is one of my favorite places. But also bear with me. Growing up in East Lyme, you would take a big trip, and the big trip would be to go buy Levi's at Marcus.
Yeah.
So I thought that I still look at Marcus every day and think that it's a pretty cool place. So, for half of our candidates, beginning with Kat Goulart, what do you see as our greatest obstacle to the preservation and rehabilitation of New London's historic housing stock, and what might we do to protect at-risk houses from demolition? You have 90 seconds for this question.
Thank you. I think that I'm going to stay pretty consistent with the answer that I gave on my questionnaire. I believe it's money. I think that a lot of us have really lofty goals and great intentions with historical buildings, and people purchase things or would like to purchase things, and we can see the vision, but it's the finances that so quite often get in the way, and we have within our city and city surrounding unfinished projects or buildings that are purchased and homes that are purchased that projects are never started. So I would like to see agencies within the city, and if there isn't one, to maybe have other agencies coalesce and come together so that we can help building owners and homeowners find money via grants if the climate permits to have tax abatements, and anything that we can do, because pulling along other people also pulls along the city, and it helps us all go. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha Marks.
The answer definitely is money. Like I said, I'm in these homes all the time, every day, and the people just can't, our constituents can't keep up the homes. So, like I had said before, Fresh New London has a great idea with the Community Land Trust. I think it's something, they're very organized, not-for-profit, and I think council and we have to get behind them and help them with that, because that's a way that we can afford our constituents home ownership and keep the beautiful homes that we have, get them up and running, so they can be lived in. And the same kind of like the Hope New London on Belden Street, like I had said before, what they have done with one house at a time. And we have the no interest loans and low interest loans, and I think we have to let our constituents know about them. A lot of people have no idea. We don't do a great job all the time of advertising what we have. And so I think with our CDBG grants, and we do have some of the no interest and low interest loans, we have to let our constituents know about those.
Thank you. Alma Natatas.
You're getting good.
I'm getting there.
So on the question of what I believe is an obstacle, I believe that, and I'm just going to use downtown as an example, and that is to have a really, really solid plan. And when I go back to this form-based codes, when we have a building that's vacant, that's up on the market, and you have a developer or an individual that's interested in buying that, there should be very clear expectations of the rules for that building and what they can do to it and what they can't. And so I want to start with that, because I definitely think that we need to go back and look at our current zoning regulations, because I think we can do a better job at making it less complex than what it really is. As far as the tax abatements, I am still open to learning more about and having a dialogue about that. I'm not, like I said, I would like these organizations to aggressively pursue grants, because I think that the money is out there. And I know some good grant writers, but I am not opposed to tax abatements. I would just like to know more about the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Nolan.
I happened to go to an open house today. I took a picture of it. The program's called ECHO, Eastern Connecticut Housing Opportunity. What they do is they provide families with some pretty nice, I guess you can say, breaks in how much their houses are going to cost. They go in and they redo the house, and then they sell it at a reasonable price for them through the market. I think that the programs that Councilor Marks talked about, the HOPE program, which is a similar program, and also in regards to the grants and some of the subsidies or incentives that we should maybe try and rethink to give for people. But the hardest part of it, I think the obstacle is the financial aspect of it, as everybody has said. But I think with all the programs that are out there, we need to educate our community in regards to put more information out, advertise it more, or have a central location where they can find out more about the things that they can help out.
Thank you. Marty Olson.
Folks, the number one issue is cost. And it's because the older buildings, the building materials, don't meet today's standards. They're very, very different. Also, the building and fire codes today are significantly more stringent, and for the better, I might add. But it also adds to the cost of rehabilitation of older structures, and that has to be taken into consideration. Perhaps you may know or not, but I spent the better part of my adult life in home improvements and construction and contracting here in southeastern Connecticut. So this is my field of how I've supported myself and my family. I also am a proponent of the HOPE and ECHO programs, as well as Habitat for Humanity, which is the three programs that have done terrific work throughout the community, and we should be supporting them. The community does have a housing conservation program, which is a revolving loan fund. Unfortunately, all it requires is bringing the building back to code, not necessarily back to historical standards. If we could perhaps modify that to be a bit more proactive, I think we'd be on a much better place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, guess what? You get a new question.
I use cereal.
Okay, do you favor stronger protections for the historic character of downtown New London, such as the creation of a local historic district with more regulatory teeth? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, I do, and this is something I can wholeheartedly agree with. I believe we do need a detailed, focused plan outlining historical districts. A plan that is known and available to anyone. So when a builder or developer comes around, he knows exactly what he can or cannot do. Too often, as we are discussing tonight, that's not clear. So that's what I would like to see. Thanks.
Thank you. Tim Ryan.
I'm a little disappointed. I wanted to answer that previous question too, but maybe we'll get a chance for that. But I'm assuming I have the same question as you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with respect to the establishing a downtown historic district, I think right now Landmarks and the Historic District Commission actually have pretty much all the coverage they need to establish one. There is nothing else you need to establish one. You have the general statutes in your favor that will allow you to do that. Our own ordinance allows you to, well, the general statute allows you to expand the ordinance and create actually multiple HDCs if you want. So I believe the air coverage is there for you to do that, and I agree with John in that as long as the general statute requires, you have the support of all existing property owners to establish that local historic district. I don't see a problem with that at all. I mean, if you have the majority of owners that are in support of it to create the new local historic district, there's not a problem in my mind at all.
Thank you. John Satter.
Historic district, yes. Defining it, making proper rules so that everybody understands what those rules are when it comes in prior to purchase, not after the fact, though. I also believe that that will be beneficial and helpful to those people that are in fact looking for rehabilitation. Like Tim, I would have loved to have answered the other question also, but that just didn't happen this evening. So regarding more teeth, again, as long as they're fair and equitable laws and rules, that's fine, but not to a point where we are actually denying people their rights as property owners.
Thank you.
But I apologize, but keeping in mind that we do have to worry about neighbors also.
Michael Tranquita.
Thank you. I also would have liked to have answered that question. It has to be historic preservation, and the rules that go with it have to be fair and balanced. We had a referendum, a neighborhood referendum, maybe about 10 years back for the Pequot Colony Historic District Commission to create a historic district commission in the Pequot Colony. It was defeated by the homeowners. And I was clerk at the time, and the reason it failed was it was almost like reading 100-page instructions to put a car together. There was no neighborhood input. If I remember correctly, there was one public information meeting, and basically listened to the homeowners who came into the clerk's office to vote, and the vast majority of them actually came in to vote instead of doing it through the mail. They didn't understand what they were looking at, and the biggest problem was they were afraid that they couldn't even change the walkway leading up to their house without going through hoops. So it needs to be fair and balanced. There needs to be both the city side, the homeowner side. Everybody needs to listen to everybody, look at to see what the neighborhood holds, and take it from there. But that was one of the reasons why it was defeated.
Thank you. Don Vendetto.
Thank you. I'm going to carry on with that because I actually live in one of the homes that was in the study for the Pequot Historic District. And when I moved into the home, I read the packet of information where the previous homeowner had made some notes. And it was confusion more than anything else, and a fear that they would have to go through a lot of different kind of red tape to just get approval to paint their house. So I would want to definitely I would support the fact of the creation of a local historic district that had some teeth, but I want to make sure that the rules governing the district are not so cumbersome that they would ward off potential developers and investment, as kind of what happened with that undefined thing with the Pequot colony. So it'd be very important, I think, that the core structures of the buildings are protected and the exterior facades be protected. Those are the things visible from the street. But you need to have some flexibility on the interior of the spaces so that these historic buildings can actually function in the modern times. So keep them looking historic on the exterior, but make them work for modern use on the interior. And that's going to come through a master plan. Others have touched on that. And without that plan, it's going to make it very difficult for us to move forward. So step number one, define that district, define some rules, and then start to promote those so people know what they're getting into before they make a purchase. Thank you.
Thank you. Efrain Domingue.
Yes, just to tell you, there's someone trying to get in. They keep knocking.
Oh, really?
To get into the debate. His name is Max Losada. So I'm just saying. All right, just to know that I did. Okay, so first of all, I'll be brief. Yes, we need a plan that is detailed, showing a historical district. That's it.
Thank you. We're moving on to our next question. Before I do so, I'd like to thank Landmarks for having me here, certainly. And I have to say that the job that Laura Natush is doing with Landmarks is fantastic. She's hard working. All of the, I've done a number of these now, and I'll tell you, what I was handed tonight was fantastic. This is so organized. So I can only imagine that carries over into the everyday workings of New London Landmarks. So, finally, beginning with Don Vendetto, and we're reversing the direction. All right, we're going that way this time. All right, each candidate has a final 2 minutes to speak, during which they can answer a question they weren't asked, so folks, feel free to do that now. Offer a rebuttal, or make a general closing statement. We're going to start with Don Vendetto.
Thank you. I'm going to answer one of those questions that I did not get to answer. First of all, thank you again, everybody, for coming out. That'll be part of my closing statement. The question in regard to the greatest obstacle for preservation and rehabilitation of the historic housing stock, and in my written response, I started with, in a word, money, and others have already touched on that. You know, we need to think in the mind of a developer, somebody that's looking to invest into real estate that is going to net them some sort of a gain. So obviously their tendency is going to be to try to find the least expensive type of property and ones with the least amount of work required to make them functional. So that in and of itself, a lot of time it just rules out historic properties. So, you know, and it's difficult for us to control exactly what developers are going to do or doing with their properties outside of our existing building codes and ordinances. But by establishing that all-encompassing historic district, and it needs to cover all of the downtown area, you know, we can ensure that all of our buildings that qualify as historic are at least protected and looked at first. So I think that's really important. In general, the historic significance that we have in the city is somewhat untapped, or maybe very largely untapped. And I think we need to create that destination vibe. And again, think about how Mystic does it. Think about how Stonington does it. They have nothing else to offer travelers and tourists than we do. It's just how they market it, how they package it, and how they've protected those buildings and integrated them into their development. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Thank you. And Michael Tranquita.
Thank you. To answer the questions about the obstructions for historic preservation, we all miss the first letter of the alphabet for homeowners, and that's the letter A for assessment, which is that dreaded word that comes up every 5 years. We as a council cannot basically change the laws governing assessment in the state. That's done by the state legislature. A lot of homeowners in New London, maybe there who are not the medium income homeowners, they're getting by with paycheck to paycheck. They own a house, they're making their mortgage payment. A lot of them are afraid to improve their house because of the assessments and how the assessor has to assess that house. They're afraid that if they do improvements or improvements that's noticeable, they're going to get hit with an assessment the following year, and that's stuck with the property. If we could change the assessing laws to gradually phase in an improvement, I think you would see a lot more homes in the city starting to be rehabilitated than we are doing right now. But again, that's the General Assembly's domain. It's unfortunately, it's only a one-way street, but it's something that the state has to look at because the housing stock is running down and it's so poor in this state. And I just like to thank everybody for coming out to the debate. Thank you.
Tim Ryan, please.
Who's John Sauer? You want to skip over John?
Uh-oh. Go ahead, John. I'm reading the list.
Michael closed it. I'll open with it. Thank you very much for coming out this evening and listening to us. I would also like to answer the question about the obstacles in rehabilitation. And as most mentioned, it's dollars. Not just dollars to purchase, but also dollars possibly for somebody that's young to acquire those dollars. I have a son who happens to be sitting in the back of the room, taking me right now, and he wanted to buy a historic landmark. But unfortunately, he was unable at a young age to qualify to rehabilitate. But besides dollars, I have a fear. I have a fear that the younger generation is not quite as respectful of our historic places as we may be. I took it upon myself, knowing that at a very young age, being involved with my children in scouting, I made sure that I took them to a lot of the historic landmarks, starting with the Hempstead House and taking a bike tour, riding to Shaw's Mansion, as people have mentioned earlier, then to the Custom House, and from the Custom House to the train station, and from the train station up State Street to the courthouse, and then from the courthouse over the ancient burial grounds and to the Buckley, the old former Buckley School, where of course the John Winthrop statue was. But I think too we need to educate our young to make sure that they understand that this old broken down building just doesn't need to be demolished and something new. Because the housing stock that we have here in New London cannot be matched anywhere in southeastern Connecticut. Yes, we were the first city, the first place that people moved to, and that is a benefit we have. And to see any of those homes destroyed is just not a good thing. But as Scott said, when you come from East Lyme, where the houses are much newer, to move into the beautiful homes that we have here in New London, there's just no match. So, but again, thank you all for coming out this evening.
Tim Ryan.
Sure stuff, John.
Yeah, we're good. We're back on track.
So one of the reasons I moved to New London was for the historic housing. Like John said, you really can't match it, and it's the character of the houses is beyond compare. To that end, I do believe that historic preservation and rehabilitation is actually a revenue source for us. It is. We talk about revenue sources in the last debate, if anybody went there, and this is one of them. And the way we do that, I didn't get to answer the question before, so I'll do it now. We need to start, as some of the other people talked about, expanding the options we have for low-interest loans, looking into other options to get people into the houses and make it affordable for them. We need to expand and enhance our efforts on advertising. I know Laura does a lot of that, and so does HTC. Advertising and coordinating with the existing grants and subsidies and helping homeowners that are interested get on the state register or get on the national register to access those grants and subsidies. I will say that, as Don mentioned, Stonington and Mystic are very similar in terms of the types of houses. But one thing they have that we don't is a tax base. And so what comes with that, unfortunately for us, is that we have a really high mill rate, as everybody knows. And so if you start fixing up a house, and as Mike alluded to, and you get your assessment raised, your taxes go through the roof. So historic preservation is one piece of the puzzle. It's an important piece, but we need to look at it as a whole. We need to address the entire situation within New London in order to help historic preservation and make it affordable and get people into the houses and interested in spending the money on the houses to rehabilitate them. Lastly, as Laura mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but you're going to be posting our answers if we give them to you on the website. So I will say that the full text of our answers will be on the website, and it will be on my Facebook page, Tim Ryan from New London. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
John Russell?
Well, the question that John Sadai is waiting for is, what's the score now, John? 4-0. 4-0. All right. For you baseball fans. Well, I'm going to talk a little different things. I'm going to talk about why I think I would be a good counselor here in the city. One of the things that occurred while I was on the council in 2009, 2011 was we had no tax increases, 0 tax increases. Then we changed our form of government, and since then it's been completely controlled by one party. All right? Taxes have gone through the roof, and when we balanced the budget, we had 92 policemen. We have less than 70 now. So figure that math out. That's big dollars. All right. What I bring to the table is I'm a businessman. I look at things in terms of return on investment, and that doesn't have to be money. It can be quality of life too. All right. I'm well known for starting a business called Russell's Ribs, which I opened. It was my idea. I put it together. I opened it in 1990. I sold it in 2003. Then I got involved with giving back. And since then, I've helped start the Homeless Hospitality Center. I thought up and started the Homeward Bound Treasures, which is a business on Golden Street, which is a thrift store that benefits the homeless, which is what I like about this, completely taxable. That's one of the things I like about that. And for the last 15 years, for those of you who know me, I've been doing fundraisers on my own that I've started and ran. And to date, I've raised over $500,000 for organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, the Kiwanis, New London Youth Football, and the Homeless Hospitality Center. So I know how to do things, and I know how to get things done. And that's what I think we need in the city. I know how to make a payroll and run a business. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Marty Olson.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out tonight. This has been our second opportunity to address the public, and both sessions we've had a full house, and I think that speaks very well of our community that there's so much interest in this election. I would like to share with you, since this is a New London Landmarks event, that I live in a carriage house, and it's over 120 years old down the south end of the city. It's been in my family since before World War II. So I thought you folks might like to know that. And there are two policy issues that I think that we need to be aware of and stress, and I've outlined them a little earlier. And one, which I think is 1A actually, is owner occupancy. We need to get folks living in our community. The absentee landlord issue is a very severe problem. Deterioration of neighborhoods, lack of caring. We really need people who are living here, are vested here, and care about our community. It's very, very important. And tying into that, and again, I alluded to this earlier regarding these sober houses, these are unregulated and unsupervised. And they supersede our local zoning. They can plop in anywhere. And our only recourse is if something happens, which like was reported in the paper in the last week, 3 within a few days. It's pretty frightening to me. Now, I'd also like to address question number 6. Do you favor stronger protections for the historic character of downtown New London, such as the creation of a local historic district with more regulatory teeth. And I'd like to share with you what I perceive to be as a success in the downtown area, where people working together, and it's a city center taxing district, where the building owners, business owners got together and made a decision to pay a surcharge, an extra tax for the benefit of their area. And they worked together to achieve that goal.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Anthony Nolan, please.
Good evening once again, and thank you for everybody being here this evening. We appreciate you coming out and being here to hear the voices that are trying to be leaders in the community. I'm running again because I want to help fix what's broken. It's not perfect. We all understand that. It all needs work. And we step forward to try and do that. We can only do that with what we're given while we're in the seat that we're in. We can't do it alone. We need your support to do that. And that is, again, why I'm glad that you're here. I have an open door, a public number. I try and do office hours to try and get people to come in and try and give us an understanding of what they might think that can help us make your living a better living. So I want to open that opportunity again and let you know that if you have some information that would help us make it better for you, please let us know. The council that I run with, I think that the council works very hard. You might see some disagreements with us, but I think we work really hard to try and make it better for New London with what we have as far as finances and what we have as far as for us to be representatives for you. I can't really blame anybody for the condition that the city's in. We just came into it, and we're trying to work with what we have, like I said. Please continue to support me for city council, and I will continue to try and do whatever I can to try and make this a better place for us to live.
Thank you, Anthony. Alma Martartes.
Perfect.
It only took me 8 questions.
So I want to talk a little bit about historic preservation because we talk during these debates on the platforms when we're going door to door. We everything that's on people's minds are the taxes and the state of the budget state right now. And I always go back to the same thing, and that is how much money we have in the bucket. And it's not very much, with 44% of our land non-taxable. So in my mind, what we need to do is have a strategic plan that looks out 5 years from now, not next year when we're scrambling to figure out how we're going to allot these funds for budgets. And part of that is historic preservation using economic development, using smart growth. It falls directly in line with our POCD that we just finished. That document comes around every 10 years. The Planning and Zoning was tasked with rewriting that, and it specifically talks about historic preservation. It is what we should do. Smart growth principles talk about using the buildings that you have, building up instead of out, protecting open spaces, and putting them in areas that make sense, that are walkable and bikeable. And so I support that. I believe that these plans need to be not piecemeal, meaning that if we're going to have a plan, then we really should look at the current zoning regulations. That we're using a playbook from the 1980s. It just doesn't make sense, and it makes it very difficult for businesses to come in because it's a complex system. So I would like to see that as part of the strategic plan. I'm going to leave you with one thought. Form-based coding, Collinsville. If you've ever been to Collinsville County, if you've ever driven through there, taken a walk through there, they have that. They're very successful at that. And somebody at some point made the decision that said this makes sense. Let's change the way that we are doing business in the city. Let's change the regulations. And they took a chance, and it panned out. And that's what we have to start doing, in my opinion. So I do have a political Facebook page, Alma Martartes for City Council, and I'll be available to answer any questions after the debate.
Thank you, Alma. Martha Marks.
thank you everybody for coming. It kind of gets you excited to live in New London now, thinking about all these great places that we have here and how special we are. Historic preservation, there's something else pretty special about New London. There's some days that I go and I see 7 patients a day, all aged between 95 and 100, who have all lived in New London their entire lives. And the stories that they tell me and the history that they tell me is fascinating. And I think we need to figure out a way of getting all of their stories on record, on videos, get these kids in the STEM, in the art schools to go out and interview some of our residents, because it really is fascinating to get the history right out of, they talk about walking home from school of the hurricane of 38, so they had no idea they were having the hurricane of 38, and their stories are fascinating. So that's just, it's really not landmarks, but that is something about the history of New London that I think about often during my work day. And like I said, to me, one of the most important things is home ownership. I think it's the American dream. I think we have a lot of residents who live here right now who would give anything to be able to own a home. And we have to figure out some way, a little bit better way that we can do that, because the landlords that own some of our homes are not doing a really nice job with them. And our residents are living in some pretty terrible conditions. So in my next term, that's definitely, both of those are things that I'm going to work very hard at. And I hope you consider me for a second term, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. And Kat Goulart?
Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you again, Landmarks, for hosting. I love that this is a different kind of debate. We're not so much talking about taxing and spending, and we're talking about something that we don't often talk about, which is historical preservation, which is largely on the fringe, is largely marginalized, and you don't often hear historical preservation in the same sentence with economic development. So I think conversations on evenings like tonight are super, super important. When we're talking about New London, oftentimes in those conversations is, New London's such on the edge of revival. We're almost there. We've got all these great ingredients. That's what's missing, is the historical preservation piece of that, capitalizing on that history. And we have all these different boards and agencies that are really sort of working uniquely on their own and in these little vacuums. We have a board that focuses on history, a board that focuses on beautification, one for economic development, one for planning and zoning. Yet we don't come together and talk about what we can all do to propel New London forward. That's a conversation that I've started with the Economic Development Commission. It's actually on our agenda for the next meeting, so if there's anyone here in this room, Frank, then you'll get to have that conversation with me next time. Something that I would like to see is for us all to come together, and where Ms. Nartadas touched on the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development. It was largely put together by Planning and Zoning. We had a conversation at Economic Development after it was done, thank you, of why weren't other boards and agencies like Economic Development, or I'm losing my words here, so I won't take too much time. It was open to the public, but it wasn't in a formal setting where all of the agencies got a chance to come together. So that's the conversation that I think we need to have, is generally to work together to help propel New London forward. I also have Facebook. I see the red card coming up. It's facebook.com/cat4nl. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ephraim Dominguez.
Thank you, Attorney Scott. Thank you again for moderating tonight. I want to thank Laura and the Landmarks and all their members who are here for allowing us to debate tonight, and also especially each of you that have sat here for probably like 2 hours almost. Thank you. I strongly believe we need to protect and preserve our historical buildings and sites for years to come. Not only by establishing, policies and establishing the local, the detailed plan, a strategic plan. But I think something that resonated when Councilor Sally said is educating our children. I think it's important. I think when we educate our children and they know the value and the importance of what's around them, what surrounds them, and where they're coming from, they're gonna get it. One thing I can tell you, I have an example, or something I can use as an example is, every day in our school, I've been a 20-year public school teacher, and every year we do the pledge. Okay, I tell the kids, why is it that we do the pledge? Okay, they have to know. Sometimes they don't understand, but they have to know. We're not doing it because of whatever. We're doing it because there were men and women who served our country who have died to give us the freedom that we have today. Okay? And it's the same way when you educate people, you're going to wake them up to the reality of why are we preserving something? Why are we honoring something? And that's what we need to do, besides, of course, the policies and everything else. Another thing that I want to say, too, is that, again, I'm running for election. I've been a 2-term city councilor. I have also been a former youth pastor at Oasis Restoration Church. And what I'm proud of out of all those things is that I am the co-founder of a parade that's been running 2 years in a row. It's called We Are New London Parade. And the focus of this parade is to celebrate our people, our city, our culture. Okay, we need to have a revival in that. We need to let people know, surrounding towns, how great our city is. And lastly, I do have a website and Facebook, and I promise to be a good listener and to make sure that your voice is heard as I lead the city forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and good night.
And basically, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'm sure the candidates will stick around and chat with everybody. Also, I don't know if I mentioned that one of my other favorite places was New London High School gym. My daughter was on the state championship team last year, and they won a spectacular game last year against Stanford at the buzzer. So that was like my favorite memory ever. But with that being said, in today's political climate, I mean, there's no one here that has called anybody deplorable or a crook. I mean, this is lovely. This is civil discourse. I think you have a group of people here that are looking at what's best for our city. They'll be happy to answer any and all of your questions. And I thank you all for coming out, and thank you to New London Landmarks for hosting.